Hey everyone, this is Will from Charlotte, North Carolina, and welcome to this brand new and exciting episode of The Missing Piece. Very often, if you follow our show, that you know previously that we've been talking about this country of India for so many episodes, especially in terms of this economic partnership, not only between India and the US, and also this friction between India and China. However, in this episode, I still would like to center on this critical nation in Asia, but meanwhile, it's not just about the politics. It's something much deeper and what we called hidden within the society. It's social matters. It's social justice. Some of the critical, urgent issues that we should address not only through discussion, but also through literature, movies, and etc. So that's why today, Will is very honored to invite the author and another famous journalist. And Ms. Chatterjee is the best-selling author, a journalist, and a columnist. And she's a former correspondent and columnist for the Economic Times. And for the same newspaper, her column California Dreaming was about her life as an immigrant mother in America. It's gun violence and shooter drills for kindergartners. Her latest book, called The Water Phoenix, a magical realism memoir of how she healed from childhood abuse, was in the top 5 best-selling nonfiction of 2020 and #1 on Google India. Ms. Chatterjee, welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will. I'm honored to be here.
Ms. Chatterjee, as I mentioned before in the intro, when we think about the country of India, too often, even until today, we always focus on the issue related to economic partnership, political shifts, and also even to put in a broad way, we'll think about the leadership, under Narendra Modi. But however, after researching your book and after talking to you briefly, I found this is something more urgent that we should address through your book. So let me ask you a question. What motivated you to write such a dramatic and heart-wrenching book?
Well, it's a little hard to answer because it's not a typical reportage or just going on the field and researching kind of, what we do as journalists. I didn't set out to write this book. No one in their right frame of mind would do such a thing. However, over the course of my life, close to 50 people have shared very intimate details of their own abuse. And this is a thing that happens when you are, especially a foreign correspondent, you're kind of very globalized, you know what it's like.
Right.
And a lot of behind the scenes stuff if people start telling you their stories. So it just moved me how cookie cutter it was, how rampant child abuse was, how hush-hush it was, how people who are very successful or appear very happy, or people who, I happen to know a little more and knew how bitter they were or how bad their relationships were. By relationship, I mean your relationship with work,
sure,
with not just your romantic partners, but your friendships, how you show up day to day. All of it was completely framed. And as psychology and neuroscience has consistently shown us that our neural pathways are set by age 7 or 8, and then we're just repeating the same patterns again and again unless we go through psychotherapy processes, or consciously do some work to change that. So we keep getting the same triggers again and again. So which means it never really left most of us. And it's so common in India because it is a society with no boundaries whatsoever. And we were just talking about, it's going on in the courts right now. This is marital rape, and there are people actually going against it, and they do not understand what is even marital rape. And it's the innocence or ignorance, whatever you want to call, of a society that is so deeply patriarchal that this is even an issue. So I will not say all men are against it, but it deeply points to how flawed this society is, how we are raised without boundaries, without consent, without any sort of identity except for that which is imposed upon us. And so child abuse is very rampant. And, the National Crime Reports Bureau of India said over 109 children were abused daily in 2018. And these are just the reported cases, which are a fraction of a society heavily built around shaming. Like all ancient societies, I think, but, where expression is curbed. And even though my book was so well received, I have still been shamed. So, and at the same time, my DMs are filled with people saying, "Hey, this is my story, and I was suicidal, and now I'm not," which is, what any writer wants to hear. It's the greatest award, the greatest success one could ask for. So it is everybody's, not everybody's, but it is, extremely common. And, the World Health, I was just telling you, the World Health Organization said 1 billion kids aged between 2 to 17 were abused in 2019, which was higher than the number of coronavirus patients in 2020. So this is a pandemic that has been, I don't know since when it's been going on.
Right.
And the reason you don't hear about it is because you will, by you, I mean the world at large, we will only see what is presented to us. And this is increasingly becoming the case as investigative journalism, gets lesser and lesser funding. There's more threats. The narrative is controlled. In many ways, social media should help. But I don't know. I have more faith in, I think, the younger generations, because I'm not even on Instagram, and the book kind of became a little movement on Instagram. A lot of, the LGBTQ community came out sharing their stories that what they thought was a love relationship at age 15 was actually rape, and how this book helped them process all of it. So there's a lot that's going on, and Gen Z and the younger crowd is definitely a lot more vocal.
Before we get to the younger generations, and one thing I want to piggyback on what you just said, but based on what you just described, you would say this nation would seem to me is without morality, or the people who can't really understand what's right and what's wrong. Why would you describe the country this way?
I don't think that's what I meant. I meant personal boundaries.
Right, the personal boundary. Right. Yeah. What does that mean? What does that mean, by the way?
Okay, it looks like this. Let me give you a small example from my book, which is everybody's story.
Sure.
I was 6, and we call anybody who comes home auntie and uncles, even if you're not related. It's something I have to always explain in America. I have met this person for 5 seconds in my life. I'm supposed to sit in their lap. They're going to pet me, like I'm a dog or something. Only I don't want to be that. I'm not as friendly as a dog. And what does that do to that child? And it's considered rude if, you're the super cute, chubby-cheeked kid, and this stranger comes and pulls your cheeks and hugs you and puts you on their lap. And as an adult, would that be acceptable if somebody just walks on the street? If I'm a woman and if somebody does that to me as a grown-up, that would be abuse. In America, I could call the cops, right? This random stranger. How is that not a crime? And how is that is it's just considered love. Nobody's intentionally doing it. So when you're raised like that, as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, because the thing with child abuse is, how will you have access to that child? If a child... With children, you have to have access, which means somebody has been trusted to keep the child safe. There are a lot of other things, and a lot of men have written into me. I wish I'd have known more about this earlier, about their stories of abuse, in which case they were molested by teachers, which was a whole different, by domestic help, something, it's quite different from, most of the others I know. But what I want to come to is this boundary is a personal boundary, not a country. We like to see everything as social, political, but it starts at grassroots level. The political is personal, the personal is political, before it becomes stats, So when that 5-year-old starts, hey, so I have no rights, I don't like this. Clearly, every ounce of me screaming that this stranger cannot do this to me, and he's just hugging you, but maybe they'll start feeling you up, maybe they won't. But the point is, this becomes a child's identity. I have no boundaries. You're not aware, which is why this is even a subject, this whole marriage thing that's going on in courts. They cannot understand it. And I empathize, unfortunately. Why they cannot understand it is because it is so messed up it's a psychological, we're talking about the psychology of a society. And it is not just India, by the way. I think it's in most ancient cultures, we did not know what boundaries were.
Right. Ms. Chatterjee, I want to ask you, again, when you mention the younger generations today, and it's not just the youth that in India, but also live across the continent. And we know that when we look at some of the political or social movements, younger generations today are very active in engaging these social matters. But coming to your book, and from your standpoint to write this book, how important it is for the younger generations, the Generation Z, the millennials in India alone today to understand these matters. And again, how would you think that they could understand or they could form the concept of child abuse, and based on what you wrote?
I'm just going to go by, I actually got interviewed by one of these Instagrammers. I'm usually very open, and also based on my DMs. One of them really was very relevant because she said, I thought I had a very happy childhood. I was never sexually abused. My parents gave me everything I wanted. But reading a book, and the interesting part about this book is there's just, I think, 3 instances of abuse, which are about 1 or 2 pages. At most, the abuse scenes are like 4 or 5 pages. The rest is a child figuring out, oh, so this is love. Oh, but now my abuser is kind to me. No. So he can be wrong. Maybe something is wrong with me for feeling this way. That's how imposter syndrome starts. Or, oh, why am I feeling scared now? So I think it's the PTSD of it all, which made sense. And the emotional abuse, the abandonment that children feel. I think it's just because, unfortunately, we love as a nation to compete for tragedies. Not as a nation, I would say as a world.
Right.
Cancer. Oh my God, they have cancer.
Right.
But if somebody's having a panic attack day to day, I'm sorry, their life is hell as well. And the fact that because it's not visible, it just isn't valid. And I think that's what is the difference with Gen Z. They are a lot more woke. And these are the kind of messages they have been telling me. They've been very, fairly open. And we have the LGBTQ community, especially coming into more self-expression in India, very, very late. But, it has been happening. And unfortunately, abuse was pretty rampant there, and they have been open about it. So I think it's just like in 1991, our economy opened up. Liberalization. I think that's what's happening at a social and a psychological level with the younger generation spearheading it.
But let's just say if this matter, it's so critical and is so prevalent in the country today, I guess naturally people will think, why isn't the government doing something to help? Or, not just really say saving the children, but let's start from this educational level. Why isn't the government or any organizations locally in India say, this is not right, or, this is not acceptable, because we need to understand what is personal boundaries and what to do and how to keep yourself being attacked, from those matters. But why isn't the government doing something, and how ineffective it is today?
These are such complicated matters. There are, of course, nonprofits who deal with it. And the fact that these conversations are even happening, the fact that these type of books are even getting published. And let me tell you, I wanted this to be a novel. And the reason it's a magical realism memoir is because it reads like fiction. It goes into, how a child processes it, to a hyper imagination. It's very much like, it has been described like Rushdie's work. And so it was supposed to be fiction, but the publisher insisted that it be a memoir simply for this reason that you mentioned, because there are no books like this in India, especially or any in the world where the healing has happened and somebody has managed to have a very fulfilling life. So they insisted that it be a memoir, and that made it harder for me, right? Because all these people are alive. And this is what a lot of memoirists will tell you. We have to wait for people to die to write that truth, no matter how many, people it might help. Like it's another thing altogether. So there are non-profits. People are talking about good touch, bad touch, and I think those are great starts. I have talked, I've been on panels with a lot of psychologists and non-profits, which is a great start because they are seeing the psychology part of it.
Right.
With anthropologists, with all of it, and as well, and there is a lot of interest in this because, again, like you're reaching out to me. Criminologists from Australia have reached out, people from Japan. So there is clearly some interest in this because the world is more global. These nonprofits get international funding. They want to know how can they break the psychological, social, cultural barriers to reach this demographic better, because you're dealing with people who are completely shut off because of all this, all the PTSD. So there is that, but I'm not sure what governments can do, because what they could do is perhaps make it easier for, the judiciary process, make it easier. I shouldn't feel unsafe as a woman to walk on the streets at 6 p.m. or at sunset. This is a real problem. Whatever they say, we feel as citizens that it is a lawless land. Right. Nothing has changed. If as a woman, can I go a week of my life without being groped or being afraid? I'm not talking about midnight. Just generally, the stories are all over the place. Right. It is no secret. You just have to look at how unsafe it is. Crime is pretty high. So those are the things regulation government can definitely help with. Also, this whole business of having to prove or rehabilitation for rape survivors, and we are just talking about the ones that have come out. There was a whole Nirbhaya case in Delhi. How in just anybody on a bus, anything can happen to anybody at any time. It's pretty scary. And I'm just talking about child abuse, the most vulnerable, assuming they have a grown-up to protect
Ms.
them.
Chatterjee, I want to ask the next question is, very often that countries specifically in Southeast Asia, that's where I was based before, and I have heard a similar tragedies and similar tragic stories that happen in other countries. And meanwhile, that we depend on large non-profit organizations overseas to help. But let me be, I don't want to be sound so pessimistic, but sometimes the organizations overseas, when they help with those social issues or, related to children specifically or women specifically, it's really difficult to come up with a long-term strategy. And very often I talk to the leader or even talk to the project managers when they're setting up the projects at the beginning, they were very excited. But somehow when we came to the word culture, when we came to understand really the domestic relationship with the people, suddenly the conversation just ended. So in other words, I wanted to help, but put in a simple way is I don't understand the country well. I would love to give you resources, but somehow I am still being the outsider and not the insider. So from your perspective, if any organizations, outside India would like to help, not only from this social perspective, but psychological aspect or education, etc., What do you think it's so necessary for them to understand before actually stepping into the nitty-gritty thing regarding this challenges?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. I love it when we come to solutions. Thank you for that. So, number one, what you pointed out, they have to understand they are the outsider, period. That may work for funding, but at grassroots level, they already hate you. I'm sorry, they also hate me, city girl, writing in English. They already hate me, privilege. You are dealing with, whatever the stats may say, we are a poor country. I'm sorry, I don't care what the image is.
Sure.
Day-to-day living, it is people are still fighting for clean water, all of that stuff. That said, New Delhi has become a little bit safer. I cannot give you statistics, but it feels a little safer from what I hear from people. So regulation does help. This is what I think would work if I were a nonprofit. I would go through the news articles, look at the rape victims that have openly come out, get in touch with them. A lot of them are in rural India. Use them as the ambassador, if you will, how you have United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, I don't know, Angelina Jolie and all of them. Use that local person to be the ambassador. She's sitting there being shamed, probably still waiting for the money the government owed to her, but a lot of middlemen took away. And of course, no one will get her a job or get her married because she's the bad one, right? Or her job is just to be a woman, just to be a child, or whatever it is.
That's right.
So use them as ambassadors. This takes away the shame, stigma. Now she's a local celebrity. She has transformed from victim to warrior. That is number one. She will be able to reach out to people and there'll be empathy more and more. You have actually helped a victim that way. And she will be able to reach to them in a way because she grew up in that community. I'm talking about really, the villages, the small towns where it's all judgment. That's all. So you will be able to reach better. You have actually saved at least one life. That will impact more. Just like, me writing this book versus, a journalist doing reportage would probably not have had that impact because I've been through it. So there's a lot more empathy. And in the end, even if you're an organization, we're all humans. We are longing for human connection. Use that, It's not just a project. Whatever work we do, we are here for human connection. Use that to your advantage. So that I think will work rather than just sending outsiders.
And Ms. Chatterjee, I know you're very busy. I got one more question before letting you go. Now, the last question is, for people who were not born in the country of India, again, your book, it's widely being read, outside the US and outside India. When the reader finish reading your book, what would you want them to take away? So in other words, what would you expect the readers to understand by diving into your book? Because again, it's not, like I said, it's not a book about international relationship. It's not a book about how positive or this book could actually beautify the country in a more mesmerizing way. I mean, again, that was all good. But as I mentioned before, this is such a critical and it's a factual issue that happening in India today. So what are your expectations for readers to understand when they finish reading your book?
I will just go with what readers have told me because as a writer, once the book is out of your hands, it belongs to the world and no longer to you. I will go with what readers have said. Everyone, and during Christmas, a lot of people were, gifting it during the holidays.
Right.
They said that it allows all of us. It's got nothing to do with child abuse. It's got nothing to do with countries, though there's a lot of beautiful small town India.
Sure.
Here. It allowed you to sit with your emotions. It allows you to process your grief. Why certain foods will remind you of something that happened. Maybe you felt abandoned or bullied as a child. There's a lot of inner child work. So anybody, especially the last chapters, are all about self-forgiveness and why not to force it, because forcing yourself to forgive your abusers is already self-abusive. So it's being kind to yourself, allowing yourself to go through the emotions without adding story to it. I think anything that I would want today for people to know that alchemy is possible within you, but do not run away from those emotions. Self-love, radical self-love. Hold your hand the way you wish somebody would have when you were a child abandoned, whether it is by your caregivers, whether it is you felt bullied or alone as a child, and we've all been through it. So just this book helps you sit with yourself. It's a gift of radical self-love.
Well, Rituparna Chatterjee is a best-selling author, a journalist, and a columnist. Now, she came out with her new book called The Water Phoenix, a magical realism memoir of how she healed from childhood abuse. Ms. Chatterjee, thank you so much for being on my show, and it's been a pleasure of talking to you, and I hope and I pray that more people, not only just in the US or India alone, but also outside those social circles, people begin to pick up the copy of your book and really understand how critical and how urgent this matter is. Thank you, Ms. Chatterjee. I really